The Blue Jackets lost a otherwise forgettable game in Pittsburgh last night, but there are bigger things to talk about. Is it time for the Blue Jackets to move on from Brad Larsen? Is he hurting the team more than he's helping them? We're going to talk about all of that and more on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to bring you news, stories, trials, tribulations, yelling. There's going to be a lot of yelling in today's episode and more about your favorite team of mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and also over on YouTube. So, if you haven't hit subscribe over there, please feel free to do so. It helps me out. It helps you out. Everybody wins. So let's talk about the game, because I want to talk about the game in a vacuum, first of all, just the game as it is, and then I want to talk about the things in this game that have kind of been worrying me all season and getting worse and worse and worse. So let's start off with just the game in a vacuum, because in a vacuum, I don't think this was a terrible game. The Blue Jackets outshot the Penguins 39-34. They beat them in faceoffs. They opened the scoring. They had a really strong first period. Johnny Gaudreau opened the scoring exactly a minute in. And from there, it all just kind of went downhill. A goal from Brian Rust ties the game. Just a really stupid goal. There was, I don't know, everyone was falling over. Brian Rust, I think, was like on his butt on the ice when the puck went in. It went in, the net came up, and it went out the other side of the net again, I think. Just a really stupid goal, obviously. The second goal, I felt like could have been goaltender interference. No, excuse me, that wasn't the goaltender interference goal. That was Sidney Crosby's first goal, which was fine. It is what it is. Sidney Crosby's good at hockey, like breaking news. The second Crosby goal is the one that I kind of had an issue with. Goaltender interference in this league is such a we're gonna spin the wheel and see what happens. Power play goal from Crosby. Malkin, Evgeny Malkin, really nice play. Just completely took Jack Roslovic out of the picture. Sent him to the shadow realm. By way of deking, passed it to Gensel. Gensel passed it to, well, I think Gensel shot it, actually, and it bounced off Crosby into the net. Now, this to me felt like goal interference. Crosby was in the blue paint. He was interfering with Mozelikin's ability to make a save, and it just, I don't know, man. It didn't feel like a good goal, which obviously meant that it counted as a good goal, because I think that's how goalie interference works, is whatever you think it is, it's actually the opposite. So it's now 3-1 at the end of the second period to the Penguins on a power play goal, 2 even strength goals, and, 2 of those 3 goals were just extremely stupid. However, at this point, I did look at the stats. Elvis saved, at this point, anyway, I believe he was up to I think 24 of 27 saves. All 3 goals were high danger shot attempts, or shots for, excuse me. So he made 5 of 8 high danger saves, and then saved all of the low danger and the medium danger ones. So like at this point, there's not a ton that the team could ask him to do. I thought Elvis played really well in this game, actually. It's a shame that last goal counts on his stats. Teddy Beluga scores his first of the season. Obviously, stop me if you've heard this before. At the near the end of the third period, it was supposed to be an empty net goal. Elvis decided, actually, no, I'm going to sprint across the ice, throw my stick, and then throw myself. Fortunately, it didn't work. Would have been really cool if it had. But technically, I think that counts as a 4-on-4 goal. But just not a great offensive effort. I think Trent Jarry was very good in this game. That's I think something to be said is, okay, the Blue Jackets didn't necessarily maybe do the best job of shooting, but I think Tristan Jarry was excellent. He made 38 of 39 saves. He allowed one even strength goal. So sometimes a goalie just has a game, and Tristan Jarry, for as much as I hate it, is not a very is quite a good goalie. So it is what it is. In a vacuum, this game is fine. It happens. It's a game against the Penguins on a Tuesday. Like, the Penguins are a good team still. It's really annoying, but the Penguins are a good team. They've got good players. Even missing Chris Letang, they've still got very good players. Crosby and Malkin don't seem to have slowed down any. Jake Gensel exists solely to frustrate me. Jason Zucker had a good game. Brian Rust had a good game. Like, these are all good players. Sometimes the Blue Jackets just don't show up sometimes. Oh no, that's unfair, because I think for the most part the Blue Jackets did show up. Unfortunately, and this is something we're going to talk about in the next section, in the next segment, the players that showed up were not the players that were being rewarded with ice time necessarily. And this is something that I've complained about on this show before, but we're going more into it. We're getting angrier, we're getting more in depth. So that's coming up in just a minute on Locked On Blue Jackets. But first, I've got to tell you about BetOnline. It is your number one source for all your sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball, soccer, esports. They've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. They're the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Now, I believe in yesterday's episode, I did make a bet that Johnny Gaudreau was going to open the scoring for the Blue Jackets. So, hey, if you listen to me and you'd put some money on that at betonline.net, then you could have made a little bit of money. So head to the website today, or use your laptop or mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline is where the game starts. So, unfortunately, we have to talk about Brad Larsen, because he is kind of driving this team into the ground. Cole Sillinger, again, 9.5 minutes of ice time in total. Igor Chinikov, 11-16. Kirill Marchenko making his NHL debut. I really liked Marchenko. I thought he had a very good, solid debut. Nothing like flashy, but I thought he had a solid debut. 10 minutes and 3 seconds. That's just the all-time ice time. If you go to Natural Stat Trick, which is what I tend to use for my after-game post-game stuff, and you go to, you look at the impact that players had on the ice, and you go to shot attempts for percentage. Igor Chinikov was on the ice for 13 shot attempts for and 1 against. Cole Sillinger was on the ice for 12 shot attempts for and 1 against, and that's only at 5-on-5. So that's not counting the power play. If you switch that to the power play, then it turns into Igor Chinikov was on the ice for 19 shot attempts for and 1 against, and he had 11 minutes of ice time. Cole Sillinger, 14-1, 9.5 minutes. Kent Johnson, 23-4, 9 against in 15 minutes of ice time. Like, we haven't talked about Kent Johnson right now, but I feel like it better saying that I don't know what more this kid can do. Brad Larsen keeps saying that he has to play the right way. I actually really liked Kent Johnson's utilization in this game. He got a ton of power play time. He got some time on the top line. There was a Gaudreau, Johnson, Marchenko line for a minute there, which was a ton of fun. I don't know, man. It's so frustrating to see these kids perform and then they don't get rewarded with ice time, because for whatever reason, the Blue Jackets feel like they have to play Olivier, Crowley, and Robinson, who, I mean, I like Eric Robinson. I like Sean Corrali. I can give or take Mathieu Olivier, but I understand why he's there. Those three players, Mathieu Olivier, 11-37 ice time, 11 attempts for, 14 against. Corrali, 14-13 of ice time, 13 attempts for, 19 against. And Eric Robinson, 11 attempts for, 19 against in 13.5 minutes ice time. The only player worse than Corrali and Robinson was Andrew Peak, who had 12 attempts for and 33 against. Something I do want to mention as well, while I'm calling guys out, I do want to acknowledge Erik Branson had a very good night. He only played 17 and a half minutes, which again, I think this is part of my issue is that they're playing some guys too much, and that's impacting their performance. Some guys are designed to only play limited minutes, you know? I think playing Erik Branson 27 minutes a night is a mistake. I think he can be effective if you limit his minutes, and we kind of saw that against the Penguins. 25 shot attempts for 15 against in 17 and a half minutes of ice time. He was actually their third best defenseman behind Tim Berni, who made his NHL debut. I thought he had a solid game. He took a minor penalty and also caused a penalty shot. But hey, penalty shot, Elvis saved it. It's fine. I really, really liked Tim Berni's game. I thought he held his own solidly. 19 attempts for 8 against. And Marcus Bjork, who again continues to impress, 30 attempts for 17 against. Overall, when you look at the stats, like this wasn't a terrible game. Everyone except Roslovic, Olivier, Bayreuther, Corrali, Robinson, and Peak had a Corsi for percentage above 59%, which is not always the case with the Blue Jackets. They have kind of been a black hole of possession, but this was a really good game for them. Unfortunately, if you stack that up against the ice time, like it doesn't make sense. Your leading scorer or your leading ice time guy, excuse me, Vladislav Gavrikov, is at the low end of positive for Corsi 4. He's at 59%. He's the lowest positive player, if that makes sense. On the flip side, you've got guys playing 13 and a half minutes who have got 70%. Tim Berni played the least of any defenseman. Oh, excuse me. Gavin Bayreuther played less by 3 seconds. So Tim Berni played the second least time and had the best possession impact. It's very much in the same vein of Nick Blankenberg, who didn't get a ton of ice time and was just killing people on possession. But the thing for me and the most striking thing is that Chinakhov, Sillinger, Marchenko line. They dominated possession. After the first period, they had, I think, Cole Sillinger was 6-0 on shot attempts 4. He had 6-4-0 against in the first period. So obviously that meant that he had to sit most of the second period. If you go and look at the shift reports, where is it? I don't know where the thing that I was looking at is, but the shift chart, here it is. Cole Sillinger had 3 shifts in the first period, 2 shifts in the second period, and then 6 shifts in the third period when they finally realized, hey, this kid's, doing okay. And that still only added up to 9.5 minutes. What are we doing? What are we doing? Like, at the end of the day, I understand that just because you have potential, that doesn't mean you should be handed ice time. I get that. And I know that this league leans on experience over basically anything else. But that being said, this feels like a really great way to ruin your players' development, especially a guy like Sillinger, who had a fantastic rookie season, I thought. A guy like Chinakhov, who maybe didn't have as great of a rookie season as everyone thought he was going to, but put in the work over the summer, came back, had a phenomenal preseason, and once again has been putting in the work. If we go to team reports or team stats, and you look at how these players shape up versus the rest of the guys on the ice, who are again getting more ice time than Cole Sillinger just had the lowest ice time of, I think, anyone on the ice. I don't think any of the Penguins had. Actually, excuse me, that's a lie. They had 1 Penguin, 2 Penguins had less ice time, and that was Josh Archibald and Danton Heinen. They had less ice time than Cole Sillinger. It drives me up the wall. It really does. And is it just me? Maybe. But I feel like if you have guys like that, if you have players like Cole Sillinger, then why aren't you doing the best that you can to make them succeed? If they're playing well, give them ice time. And a friend brought this up in a group chat last night, which is, for better or worse, think what you like about Tortorella. I tend to be higher on the Torts side than the not Torts side. Say what you like about him. If a player was playing well, he played them. Did the kids have a short leash with Tortorella? Yes, but at least they actually got the leash. And I'm starting to wonder, would I rather have a coach that gives them opportunities and then benches them as soon as they make a mistake, like Tortorella did, or a coach that just doesn't give them the opportunity in the first place? Because I feel like neither of those are good options. But for me, not even playing them in the first place is the more frustrating one because it's not even giving them the option to show that they can do good things. Um, we're going to talk about a little bit more about this in just a second because I have more to say about the young players on this team, especially. But that's coming up next on Locked On Blue Jackets. So and this is the other thing for me as well is the team is bad. The team is not making the playoffs. I think, yeah, mathematic elimination, whatever. Like the team is at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. They're at the bottom of their division. Like they're near the bottom of the whole friggin' league. Like I'm pretty sure there's only like 2 teams below them, and it's Anaheim who are doing the best to tank, and Chicago. Yeah, like the Blue Jackets are tied with Arizona and Chicago for the second worst record. Like San Jose has a better record than them, and they're actively trying to be bad. It's so frustrating. The season is basically, and it feels weird to say that the season is basically a wash on it is December 7th as I record this. If you're coming to this late, when do you call the season a wash? When do you give up on the season? And I don't know that there's necessarily a season that you should give up on yet, but what does it hurt by letting the kids play? I can understand if it's I think about the Chicago 2015 Cup run, I believe it was, where they played basically with 3.5 defensemen for the entire second half of that playoff run because they didn't trust the bottom 6 guys or the bottom pairing. They basically ran with 3.5 or 4 defensemen for the entire playoffs. Like that to me, I don't like it, but it makes sense to me. Your team is bad. Your team is losing. You have players that even if you're in a bad game, even if you're losing, putting players on the ice is giving them experience. It's teaching them things. Like Tim Berni, again, great game last night. Had a couple of moments where it was very much, oh, he's facing down Sidney Crosby. He's facing down Evgeny Malkin. Like those teacher player things, even if they don't go the right way necessarily the first time, you learn things. You learn things by losing way more than you'd learn by sitting on the bench and watching other players lose instead. And I get that some guys are making money. You don't want to sit your high paid guys, but I don't know, man. It's just so frustrating to watch. I was talking to JD Young, host of Locked On Sharks, about this. I was like, man, how did you make it through the Sharks season last year? He just texted me a picture of William Eklund and Thomas Bordelot, and like, I get it, the future, but I don't know what happens if the Blue Jackets, knock on wood, if the Blue Jackets win the lottery, if they get Connor Bedard. If they get a top 3 pick, then they're getting, Bedard, Fantilli, or likely Leo Carlson. There's a handful of guys that they could pick at the top 3, and I'd be like, yes, this is an immediate game changer for this team. I don't know that this team can succeed with Brad Larsen in charge. I don't think they're going to fire him. He's got a year left on his contract after this. They don't want to pay him for that year if he's not going to be playing. I think they hired him for a reason, and that reason was that they can get him for cheap because they thought the team was going to be bad last season. The team overachieved last season. Everyone thought, oh, they've taken a step forward. Adding Johnny Gaudreau wasn't enough to turn this team into a contender, which, I mean, I fully admit I was wrong about that. I thought, hey, Johnny Gaudreau can help this team get to the next level, but I don't know that this team can get to the next level the way that they're being deployed right now. I truly don't. And I don't really know what I can do about that because I hate it here. I really do. This has been a really frustrating episode to record. It's been a really frustrating kind of couple of weeks for the Blue Jackets, but it's not all doom and gloom. Like I said, I think there are bright sparks. That's the thing. And it's frustrating that you're seeing these bright spots. You're seeing Cole Sillinger dominate. You're seeing Tim Berni make his NHL debut and just blow guys away. And it feels like a waste because they're not going to do anything. Like Kirill Marchenko, especially, I tweeted kind of, tongue in cheek about how he's going to get 2 games. He's going to play 8 minutes each game and then get sent back to Cleveland because Brad Larsen has his lineup that he likes, and he's going to stick with that. It was very much last night, and I mentioned this on Twitter. There was a moment where Jody Shelley, the color commentator for the Blue Jackets, said something along the lines of, "Man, Larsen's really shortening the bench out there. He wants his best players on the ice to go for it." And then immediately he was like, "And there's the 4th line on the ice." So even when he's shortening the bench, there are still guys getting the ice time that are not going to help this team win. Are they hurting the team? Maybe not. And I think I'm being too critical of that 4th line. I think maybe I'm expecting too much from them, but if they were playing, the customary 8 to 10, maybe 12 minutes a night that a 4th line should be getting, maybe I wouldn't have so much of a problem with it. When you're playing Matthew Olivier like 15 minutes a night to drop the gloves and record like 1 shot on goal, like that's when I have a problem. So this is not me being critical of the 4th line. This is me being critical of how the 4th line is being used, because I do think they can be effective. I just think they're not being used in the right way, and it's the same situation for the young guys, for that Cole Sillinger line, for guys like Ken Johnson. They're not being used the right way, and eventually, in the long term, I think that's going to hurt them. And I think Brad Larsen is hurting this team. I think he's hurting this team's future. If he was bad at coaching, I would accept that. Like, I think very few coaches in the NHL are good at coaching, but he has taken this roster and he has made it into less than the sum of its parts. And for better or worse, the thing about John Tortorella is he makes a team into more than the sum of its parts. You look at kind of Philadelphia started to regress a little bit, but you look at kind of what they did in the first part of this season, and that was like, yeah, that's a John Tortorella coach team. I miss that first season with Tortorella when he was motivating guys. And that's the thing about Larsen versus Tortorella, is I don't think Larsen knows how to properly motivate guys. I think he's a player's coach. I think he's a friend coach as opposed to a boss coach, if that makes sense. He's the manager at the retail place that you work that wants to be your friend, but doesn't want to manage, but wants to get paid to manage. Like that's who Brad Larsen is. And it's endlessly frustrating to watch. The Blue Jackets are in Buffalo tonight. We'll see how that goes. Buffalo's doing better than expected. I feel like Buffalo is one of those teams where I always just assume that they're terrible, and then they're actually kind of middle of the road. I mean, they're not doing great. They're 11, 13, and 1, but they're doing better than the Blue Jackets. So we'll see. I assume Corpusalo will start. He's been the better goalie, although I don't think Elvis was bad by any stretch of the imagination last night. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully the Blue Jackets can do something. Do anything to show me that there is a competent coach on this bench, or, a team that can succeed sometimes despite incompetent coaching. And that's what we'll talk about tomorrow. We'll break down tonight's game against the Buffalo Sabres. We'll hopefully get to break down a win, but who friggin' knows at this point? Maybe I'll just tweet Connor Bedard highlights for the rest of the season. This has been Locked on Blue Jackets. I've been Jay Foster. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOB FORSTER. You can find the podcast at LO_Blue Jackets. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, you can email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to my ranting. I did not mean to rant for as long as I did, but sometimes it just happens. Thank you for listening. Thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Locked on Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms. We're also over on YouTube, so if you haven't hit subscribe over there, feel free to do so. And until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.